Well, afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our Behind the Wheel series. I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by Caroline, who I'll introduce to everyone shortly. But a massive thank you to everyone who's been watching this series and who's watching today, both taking the time out of your day today, but also watching back. And I know so many of you watch this series back after we've been live. But a massive welcome to Caroline. Today we're going to explore authentic leadership, and myself and Caroline had a couple of interactions on LinkedIn following the event we were at, and passed some comments. And I kind of said it'd be great to have a LinkedIn Live, Caroline, and explore this conversation. So I guess here we are. We've made it to this event, Caroline. But I'd love maybe for everyone who's joined us today, just an introduction from yourself and a bit more understanding about what inspire your genius means would be great.
Okay then. Well, hi everyone, I'm Caroline. I'm the Chief Creative Officer of Inspire Your Genius. And I think the name really came from the fact that we genuinely believe that there is a genius inside everybody that just needs to be unlocked. You know, we have infinite potential if we're given the opportunity to do it. So our company works with leaders, teams, really to help them unlock that little genius that they have. So it's about confidence and mindset and helping them get great results. That's it in a nutshell. Amazing.
And how long's Inspire Your Genius been running for, Caroline?
Oh, I don't think I should say, really. It's about 30 years now, Paul.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you must have seen some, I guess, incredible people during that time and work with some amazing individuals, I guess.
Yeah, I just consider myself so lucky. I think the clients that we work with are phenomenal, and just seeing, I think the greatest thing you're seeing over that period of time, people going from relatively junior positions to really senior positions in companies or setting up their own business or whatever, but just, fulfilling their potential and being a little part on that journey is just such a wonderful feeling.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think as we've talked quite a bit through this series, our personal development and development of people who work for us is such a critical part of the environment that we try and foster, actually, and to give people that freedom and that space to, to feel empowered, to take accountability and look to make a real difference in the organization. I think
Paul, I just think sometimes people need permission, and I think as Jeannie, you create that permission for people to be the best of themselves, which is lovely.
Yeah. And Caroline, because I think that word of permission is such an important part of the conversation today. And I guess I see so many people who don't step forward because they feel they don't have permission. And then you see how people literally can take off and fly when given it. Maybe a great place to start is just talking around the importance of permission and what permission means in the workplace.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
I think that's a great place to start, actually. I think for me, a lot of people don't feel they have permission because the leaders don't provide boundaries. Okay. So without boundaries, there's nothing to kind of push against. So people play very, very safely. And when and they become shackled just by the traditions and the unwritten ground rules in organizations. And when it's great for us because we can be super objective, can't we? We don't work as part of the organization. So we can be those real kind of cheeky challenges on the side that kind of like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And suddenly that helps them realize that actually they have an awful lot more scope than they do have. But I don't know. What do you think? I think leaders sometimes struggle to, I suppose, define what the difference between limits and boundaries. And boundaries give you scope. They give you a safety net that's really needed to help you flourish, to help you know where you can step to. And I think a lot of people often see some boundaries as real hard stops, as real limits, and so they won't dare to step outside of them.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? How does it work for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Caroline, because I guess I've learned many times, actually, if you're not clear, people will fill that gap and that void with assumption. And generally, people will assume they don't have permission, control, responsibility, accountability, frame it however you like, and therefore could be perceived as underperforming.
Yeah.
And I guess what I see with a lot of leaders is they have this perception that people aren't stepping up, taking accountability, and get frustrated with their team, but actually have never been clear on what their expectations are.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about leaders, that's kind of the key job of leaders is to be translators and connectors. I think what happens is often information comes in and it's just regurgitated. There isn't that sense of what does this mean for you, or what does this mean for us?
Yeah.
And therefore people don't fully understand what is expected of them.
Yeah. I guess for me, I tend to frame it more around being really precise on expectations.
Yeah.
I guess when we talk about setting boundaries, for me, it seems to set limits almost.
Yes.
And it kind of says, well, you can work within this defined boundary that I've given you. And I guess at times for me, what I try and do is not constrain people by boundaries, but constrain people with what we expect.
Things like budgets, time, how far you can step. But they're other than that, I think expectations is a much better way of framing it, definitely.
And I think not being controlling as a leader about how people do things, but focusing really on what it is they need to achieve and the outcome that they're searching for. I guess we all have different ways of how we deliver, how we think about things. I did an article not so long ago about embracing negativity, bringing different perspectives for better results. And I think if we're all just much clearer on expectations with those boundaries, as you say, around authority, I think for me that's just a really important place to step. And I just wonder how many teams are operating on assumption rather than clarity of expectation.
And I think I completely agree with you. And I think sometimes as well we forget the why. We're so kind of task driven. We do this is what needs to be done. Let's get on with it, guys. Come on. We do what we can to motivate them and get on with it. But we forget thinking about that outcome. Why are we doing this? What is going to be achieved as a result? How are we going to feel about it? How often do leaders tap into that real emotional connection that people have when they've done a great job? We move on really quickly, don't we? We don't actually think about, let's just savor that joy of success for a moment.
Yeah.
And use it to build for the next time and the next time. And I think this is sometimes what I mean about being a connector. We need to connect people with information, ideas, other people, resources that are available in an organization and outside as well, because there's a lot of resources that we don't tap into outside. This is a classic example of an external resource that hopefully will be really helpful to people. So we need to help them connect with that, but we need to help them connect with purpose as well. And I truly believe that no matter what job you're in, there's a bigger reason for doing it. Yeah. And I can remember, a job that we did not that long ago was with debt collection department of the large utilities. And they were so demotivated and the pressure that was on them was so great. And all I said to them was, I just want you to imagine, just for today, I want you to imagine every single call you take is either your nana or your granddad or your aunt or your uncle or your brother or your sister, your mum or your dad, somebody that you love. And I want you to work really hard to set up a sensible payment arrangement for them. That was all it took. That was all it took, because these customers, after all, are someone's nana and granddad, aren't they?
No, absolutely.
I think just framing things in a slightly different way and translating that information in a slightly different way can be the key for unlocking that potential that's within people.
Yeah, and I think for me, Caroline, a great way, I guess I use, and a bit of a technique I use, is if I feel I've been really clear on expectations and I feel I've set my boundaries and there's no ambiguity in everything that I've said, is just to ask the people to play it back to me.
Yeah.
And just say, are we all clear? Yeah, I'm absolutely clear. Great. Spend a couple of minutes playing back to me what it is you're going to do, by when, and what's the outcome you're going to deliver. And I think it's the best way of testing someone's understood your expectations.
Absolutely.
Is for them to play that back to you. And how often do you see that, I guess, that technique of kind of playback being used in the businesses that you use? Is that?
It's really rare, Paul. And I think I think it comes down to we've become so busy and so task orientated. We kind of want to tick things off our list, and it's almost as though when I've transmitted my information, it's job done. But it's not, because if you're focused on the outcome, you're really clear that actually that is the playback is a really important part of the process.
Yeah.
And I think we've become this machine that we're on. We're just part of the machine, just moving cogs, whirring around. And we don't very often take those extra little steps that ensure the translation is understood.
And I think from my perspective, actually, it saves so much time.
Phenomenal amounts. It's crazy.
If you can tackle that clarity and maybe someone's curiosity of, actually, maybe I don't fully understand what you're asking for, can we just dig a little bit deeper? At the outset, you don't end up 2 weeks, a month, 3 months later, someone feels done an amazing job delivering exactly what you asked for. You only to have to say, well, that's only half the story.
But I think that plays back to the original question about permission.
Yeah.
You know, if you play it back, you've given them permission, because they know, they're assured that they've understood what you need, and you're assured as well. So you can just let them get on with it. It just gives people a bit of freedom to be who they need to be, and you know, it's that little step that just makes such a big difference, isn't it?
No, I think it does, Caroline, and you're probably far better positioned to answer this question than I am. But do you feel that kind of playback almost helps that person feel accountable as well? Is there something in that kind of sense of ownership? Actually, it's the way I've now articulated means that I've got a greater sense of ownership, or not? What would your views be on that point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the clarity provides that understanding, doesn't it? It provides that ability to strive to do the best that you can possibly do in that situation. And if you don't want to do it, or you don't feel you're equipped to do it, to challenge it.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it enables people to act. And I can't think of a better way of doing it. It just enables people to take action very confidently. Yeah.
So maybe our first point, when we invite some feedback, I guess I'd love to hear from people who are managing a team, leading a team, or people even within a project delivery world, which I guess is my background and where that playback comes from so importantly when you're dependent on people who you don't directly manage to deliver for you against your project. I'd love to hear from people about, are people using that technique of playback? Is that beneficial? And maybe if people who are watching us today, maybe to go and try that technique and come back and let us know how that's gone. For me, it's the best way of validating and checking understanding. And
and I would add to it as well, Paul, by saying, you know, asking people, we tend to be thinkers. We ask what people think of things, not what people feel about things. And for a lot of people, it is feeling as well. So I think in adding to the playback, it's, you know, how do you think? What do you think of that? Do you think it's something that you can do? How do you feel about it? You know, so you as a leader then get a gauge of their level of confidence to undertake the task.
Yeah.
So they haven't just understood what you want them to do. You've got a sense of whether they're ready for it.
No, I'm reflecting myself, Caroline. I think I probably missed that feeling question out personally too often, actually. You know, focus on task. Are they clear? Yes. And then not necessarily feeling how someone feels about that task in hand. So, okay, well, there's some benefits I can take directly today. Just
because I think, you know, all of this plays back to how do we help people get the best out of others and be the best of themselves, don't they? And I think it is about checking that people are ready, confident, and hopefully a lot of the time excited about what they're doing, because when you're excited and positive, you bring a whole different energy to the game, don't you?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, and if you feel it's yours to deliver, it's, you know, you do, like you say, you get that real sense of personal pride, involvement, ownership, which does go a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, no, that's great. One area I was keen to talk about, I think one of our first interactions, you commented on one of my posts, great to see someone in your position being so open and honest.
Yes.
And I'd had a few comments that, as people can see, I've, you know, been a bit more active on LinkedIn, recently did my 7-day diaries. I guess what I found quite difficult, actually, in I guess just from an understanding, is that feedback of why a CEO or someone leading a team wouldn't want to do that. And I guess I was just keen to explore your comments a bit more, why you saw that as something quite rare or something surprising, because for me it's odd that I guess that was the perception, to be honest.
Okay, interesting. Did you have any comments like that from anybody else?
I did, yeah. A few people, okay. Yeah.
So phew. It wasn't just me that gets this experience. I'm not just living in a bubble somewhere. I think for me, I think a lot of people, as they go up the ranks in organizations, they start to feel different things within themselves. They kind of feel that they have to have all the answers, and they don't like to demonstrate a vulnerability in case it looks bad on them. And I think also in line with that, I've also seen people that become entitled as well, which is not a very nice word to talk about within leadership, and therefore they become very protective of their position. And I think that sometimes those two things really feed into a heightened state of anxiety more than anything else. This need to be perfect. We don't like messing up as people, do we?
No.
And it worries me that this need to be perfect stops us being the best of ourselves, because we're human. We mess up all the time. I'm sure you and I'll say something on here, if we haven't done already, that
absolutely
perhaps isn't worded brilliantly or may not be the right thing to do. But I think showing up is really important. Just showing up is important. And we don't need to have a protective layer of bubble wrap around us. I'm sure that the majority of us are strong and resilient and can cope with a few knocks as we go along. And it's the way that we learn. If we protect ourselves too much, we're not growing and we're not adapting, we're not changing. So I think it is really important to show up. And I just don't think enough people do, Paul. So for me, honestly, when I first started seeing the things that you did, I was just like, wow, this is brilliant. Because it's a warts and all. You're being super honest about it. And I love that, because it isn't all sweetness and light, is it?
No, it's not. No, it really isn't. No. And I guess, Caroline, for me, I guess I've learned from some great people. And I guess as you did go up through your career and you progress, and maybe as you are, kind of moving into more senior roles, I do think you have a tendency to mimic some of the people who have led you. And I guess I've been blessed with some great people I've worked with in the past who've maybe just showed me a way others haven't maybe seen. I guess for me, what sits heavy with me on the most, though, is I think everyone in a leadership role, the way they behave does play hard on the people they manage, and does show the people they manage how, maybe what they expect of them. So as you're right, I mean, I've made lots of mistakes today already on various things. There's things, as you say, we've recorded here, I'd love to redo and start this again, but that's just not life, is it?
No.
And I just think, making mistakes, reflecting, looking to ways to improve is just a part of every role, and never more so if you're leading a team or an organization. I will have a brilliant idea that I want the whole organization to kind of pivot and deliver against, to 3 weeks later figure out, actually, maybe that wasn't so brilliant. But I also think that's fine. That's about how we learn and develop and how we progress. And
what you're doing by doing that, Paul, for me, is you're role modeling behaviors that you want in other people. It's okay to have ideas. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to try things and to learn as you go. And I think if you progress and become more closed, it becomes more difficult for people to understand those expectations. And we talk a lot about unwritten ground rules, help us understand what you think the unwritten ground rules are in your organization. And we often find that super startling, so one organization we worked with fairly recently, innovation was a key value, but the unwritten ground rule is don't mess up. Yeah, so it's no good then doing training and support and innovation. You've got to tackle the unwritten ground rule first, otherwise nothing will happen.
Yeah.
So I would urge leaders, I think, to think about, just watch what goes on in their organizations. Even if they're having a virtual meeting, just observe what happens, and what do you believe the unwritten ground rules are that people are operating to, and are you okay with those?
Yeah.
And if you're not, you need to find a way of changing them. And that's part of this openness and authenticity, isn't it? It's like, I've noticed that this happens. I don't really like it. What can we do to change it? What would work better for you?
Yeah. And I think, I guess for me, I only kind of have one version of me, really. And I think, if I go back to that article I did a few weeks ago about how many versions of yourself should you bring to work, I think there's definitely, and look at some of that feedback, there's definitely a need to have slightly different behaviors in different situations. If we're in a difficult commercial sense, you want to be, a little bit more closed, a little bit more robust. If we're in a new client engagement, there's different behaviors. But I think in terms of who you are and how you show up, I guess I'm not clever enough to have to have multiple versions of me, really. I just am who I am. I see things as I see them. I have good days, I have bad days. And I guess I've never been one to not show that. I think it's okay to, whether you're a people leader, a team leader, I mean, any level in the organization, it's kind of okay not to have a good day.
Too right.
And I think it's okay to talk about that. And it's all right then to have a great day and shout about and celebrate all the good things that have happened. But I guess I just see too many people who are trying to be consistent almost, and consistent almost in the way that they behave, consistent in the way that they, nothing's great, nothing's terrible. It's just all.
So let's just talk about what consistency is. We talk about authenticity and consistency. I believe consistency is really, really important, because people know what they can trust you on if you're consistent. But consistency for me is not about the how you're doing something. It really is, as you said, Paul, it is about who you are. So if you're open and bubbly as a character, that's great. That's fine. If you're more tenacious and focused, that's absolutely fine too. Don't try and pretend to be open and bubbly, because that is really confusing for people. And equally, I guess somebody like me, I showed you kind of earlier that some notes that I've made, and you can see I started off by typing it beautifully, and then it was like, oh, and this, and oh, and this. I'm not ever going to pretend to be anybody other than that person, because it just causes confusion. But what people know they can trust me on is they know that I'll always get a job done. They know that I'll always try and find the best out of it and be optimistic about it. I will always be there to support them. That is who I am, rather than what I do. And I have bad days like everybody else does, and I'm sure you do as well. So the consistency absolutely is about who you are, what are your values, what do you stand for as a person. And then the other things, you've got that line, and then the other things kind of float up and below, depending on sort of your mood and what's actually happening in the organization and in your job at the time.
And do you think everyone knows who they are? I guess,
No.
What is their why? What are the attributes? Which are the things which should show up every day?
No, I don't. And I think that's why there's such a heavy emphasis on behaviors rather than that part of it, because I think this is about it's who you bring to work, isn't it? And I think you do wear different hats, but fundamentally you're yourself. And so a lot of work that we do is really about mindset and confidence, and it's about helping people understand who they are to best make a contribution for themselves and for the organization.
And
when they understand that then gives them scope to be the best that they can be.
And Caroline, what would be your best advice for someone to discover that in themselves?
I think that reflection is really key as part of the process. I think we don't take enough time to just reflect. And I always ask people to think about, how do you think you showed up today? And are you happy with that? And I think the best advice is be curious. It's a word that you like using as well, Paul. I think it is be curious, kind of like, I'd like to know more about that. And there are various tools that you can do online to help you. So there's a great one. I'll put it in the comments afterwards, because of course I can't think what it is now, but there's a great free values identifier. That's a lovely starting point, just to kind of go, actually, what is important to me? What do I like about me? What drives me? So I think knowing your values is a really important foundation piece.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Being curious on top of that is really important. And we urge people. So my business partner, Wendy, was very, very brave. A couple of years ago, she was kind of wanting to grow and understand more about what she does. And so she went out to people that she has worked with, people that she loves working with, and people that have been difficult as well. And she went out to them and said, what 3 words would you use to describe me? And she was absolutely astounded by what came back. And that provided such an incredible platform for her to grow, actually. And it's a really simple one. Anyone can do that, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
You just got to be brave enough to do it.
Yeah.
And it gives you identifiers that you can work with.
Yeah. And I guess what's fascinating, Caroline, when you go through those activities, we've used strengths assessments as a great tool with our people under our developments and coaching and our apprenticeship schemes, is to really focus on what you're good at. But when we couple that with 360 feedback, I guess one of the most powerful things for me is, what are the 3 words that would describe how you would describe me? Would you reflect on those same 3 words in the person you want to be and the person you believe, to your question, who shows up every day?
Yeah.
And if you have a very different answer, it does suggest maybe there is a challenge in how you're behaving or how you're showing up, and maybe you're not showing your true authentic self in how you want to be perceived. And I think that takes some guts to invite, I say, Wendy was very brave to do that, but it takes some real guts, I think, to say, let's just check that how people see me is how I, is the person I believe I am. And do I have this difference where I'm actually showing a different side? I think that'd be a great exercise for everyone to think about going through.
And you know what, if you're nervous about doing it, because I think, if anybody wants to grow, I think it's a great starting point. If you're nervous about doing it, ask friends and family first.
Yeah.
And actually having friends and family and then comparing it with work colleagues is really interesting, because the reality is, Paul, if you go back to what you said about, you can't be a different person of yourself. You personally can't. They should be the same.
Yeah.
Actually, it shouldn't make any difference at all.
I feel a bit scared now about asking my friends and family those the 3 words that describe me. Maybe I should go and do that.
See when you do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess, Caroline, just to kind of round this section up, how would you best describe the kind of benefits of being authentic and being consistent to someone leading an organization? What are the real tangible things that come from that?
Performance.
In your experience?
There's nothing else to say, really, is that you get a higher performance because people know what you can be relied on for, what you mean, what you need, and they'll go and do it. Particularly, I think, when the pressure is on. If you're under the cosh at work, if people don't trust you, they're not going to run to a burning building for you, are they?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know most jobs aren't that life-threatening, but some things that people do are really, really serious, really important. There's lots of money involved. They're going to play safe if they haven't got that level of trust with you. They're going to play it safe, and often, particularly when the pressure's on, you can't afford for people to play safe. You need people that are prepared to go for it.
Yeah. And as someone, I guess, running a Gina as you do, there's no battle I would want to be in where I didn't have my team with me. And I know I almost know I don't need to ask the question, are you with me?
Yeah.
Because we have that culture, that environment that, if we're going into something where, where we're looking to open new markets right now, launch new propositions, and I just see the kind of energy and excitement, and we all know it might not work. And that's okay too.
Can I ask you the question? Knowing that as a leader, what difference does it make to you?
For me, it's massive because it avoids the need to question and doubt the people around me. So long as we're all clear on what we want to do, I'm used to being challenged hard by my team.
Mm.
And I know it comes from a position of, I want to understand because I want to be alongside you, as energetic and as passionate as you are. And obviously, my team will say, well, look, you had a great idea last week. Why don't we finish that one first? Maybe we could just hold back for another week before we start off another one. But for me, it allows me to focus on the outcome I'm trying to deliver and not spend any time or emotion thinking about, are people with me? Are we all aligned to the same outcome? And I guess I've worked with people who seem to spend so much time questioning, am I here alone? Are people with me? Do they really understand why this is important to me or the business? And I think you can replace all of that time with just effort for delivery and execution. And it's just, so much more motivating, I guess, knowing you're not trying to steer that ship on your own.
Absolutely. And that second guessing is not just about the time, it's about the emotional energy you expend on it. It becomes like this nagging voice in your head all the time, doesn't it? And it stops you being the best that you can be because you're just kind of like dealing with this all the time.
And I do think you tend to challenge things to the negative.
Yeah.
So, I generally will always be seeking positive reinforcement. So, we're entering a new market right now. We've launched some really exciting products. I just love it when I have a positive reaction to that because it reinforces me that we're doing the right thing. Yeah. I think if you're in a position where you're questioning the people around you, the team, is everybody on board, you'll look for reasons to fail.
Yeah.
You'll look for individuals who weren't fully supportive, didn't go all in. And I almost feel like you're on that journey, just finding a reason to stop and finding someone to blame rather than looking for that positive reinforcement of success. Yeah. And I think it can become an incredibly negative behavior within an organization.
And going back to what we were talking about before, if you think about role modeling, what's that telling your team if you're ending up on that sort of cycle all the time?
Yeah, no, completely. And I think it's, I guess through this, through this series of Behind the Wheel, I'm just wanting, I guess, to share more conversations like this to give people that opportunity to, I guess, think a little bit differently. We both benefit from having a few decades of experience of working. Try to put that as politely as I could, Caroline.
That hurt.
And what's been great, actually, I've had some amazing feedback of people who've kind of watched some of this feedback and said, well, I'm just going to go and try it. Yeah. Some people might be thinking, well, that won't work for me, or that's not right for my organization. I guess my challenge is, well, go and try it and prove us wrong, or go and explore and understand maybe how you could do things slightly differently. We don't, we're not looking for a complete pivot to a brand new way of behaving. It's just looking for people to try some things new, which I think is, for me, is really important as a leader, is always trying to kind of challenge yourself and to be better at what you do and how you lead an organization or a team.
Yeah, absolutely.
One post I put out the other day, which I noticed you commented on a couple of days ago, actually, was about comfort zone.
Oh yeah.
And I guess my reaction to something I'd seen elsewhere was this constant rhetoric of we have to get people out of their comfort zone because that's not a good place for people to be. And we need to push people into this area where they feel stretched, challenged, like they're developing. And I guess my view was, I just don't know I agree. Because some people can deliver incredible performance inside what we class as their comfort zone. And I guess I wondered what you feel about this, my view, this kind of over-defined term now of comfort zone, and whether you agree or disagree with me of in the way that I've presented it. But yeah, just how you see that from a people and an individual perspective.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because comfort zone is, it sounds like a lovely place, doesn't it? It's kind of cushy and cuddly and nice. And who doesn't want to be there, really? Who doesn't want to be there? And, we are obviously, my job is to encourage people into their learning zone and making sure that we avoid the outskirts of that, which is obviously into terror. And I think what I would say is the world is changing so fast.
Yeah.
That we do need to be extending the outline of our comfort zones as individuals. We need to be pushing at those boundaries and building it. And I would encourage everybody to every now and then take a foray into the learning zone so that they stay current, because otherwise we'll become obsolete, won't we?
Yeah.
With everything that's happening around us. So I think it's important that we kind of have a forage into this other world. But I think as a leader, and this is kind of, I suppose, my response to your post, I think as a leader, it's recognizing where your team are at, because, if you're succession planning, you don't want everybody to have your job. No. Do you?
No.
You don't want everybody to have your job. Not everybody wants it. So let's not pretend about this. Let's talk to people. Let's ask questions. Be curious about what drives them, because, of course, what's comfort zone to one person is actually terror zone to somebody else.
Yeah.
And we can only understand where people's levers are when we actually have a conversation with them, when we observe them, when we, respond to what we're noticing around the way that they're doing things. Does that make sense? I kind of agree with you, but I worry as well that we all need to find ways of extending it in a way that feels comfortable for us, no matter whether we want, a fast track career and be CEO in 2 years' time, or, whatever it is that we want. Everybody has to extend it, otherwise we will be obsolete.
I love the way you represented the learning zone and the terror zone.
Yeah.
I think, asking people to step into their learning zone, for me, feels a much more encouraging, positive route than saying you need to get out of your comfort zone, which feels much more negative reflection on where they are today. Yeah. And I guess my issue with this terminology of comfort zone is it feels a very negative representation of the person they are today, which could be high performing, great at what they do, very experienced, and you're constantly trying to push them elsewhere. And I love that reference to stepping in, or a foray into your learning zone. I guess my challenge, and we don't have enough time today to deal with this, Caroline. Maybe I'll seek your services outside of a LinkedIn Live. But I feel my performance dips if I stayed in my comfort zone. Mm. And I feel I get drawn to maybe what you represent more as that terror zone, because I love being in situations where I'm feeling scared of, maybe I'm the least knowledgeable person. Maybe I'm right on the edge of, I literally don't understand the conversation that's taking place, but I love exploring how I can find my role in that situation. So, I mean, maybe there's just some wiring issues I've got that need to be addressed. But I do
wiring issues at all, Paul. I just think we're different, aren't we? We're all different, and it comes back to this authentic, consistent leadership. If you want to be the best leader that you can be, you need to ask more questions. You need to find out what floats people's boat, what makes them tick, whatever it is. And I think that for me, the way that you phrased it was really interesting, just because you were talking about pushing people outside of their comfort zone. And I think it is about push and pull. I think as leaders, you need to be finding the pull lever, what's going to entice, encourage, excite, all of those really positive feelings to make somebody want to do something, rather than demanding, coercion, challenge, those kind of things. So it's always finding that pull lever that's going to make a difference to people.
Yeah, no, amazing. Caroline, I feel like we could carry on for a good couple of hours with this conversation, but I'm also mindful. I know people watching us will be thinking that they can only commit so much time to this. I guess for me, just reflect on the conversation today. A few things kind of sit with me actually. One is using asking people to play back to make sure they absolutely understand your expectations. For me is key. I'm going to change those reflections now to specifically ask people to tell me how they think, or what they think about the task and how they feel about it. And I think for me, that's just been a really important addition to a technique I've been using for some time. Actually, I feel like I've maybe been missing part of the puzzle there, and that, we'll see how that goes. Maybe we'll have a follow-up conversation.
Let me know what kind of data you get as a result of it or not. I think it'd be interesting to find out.
I guess the last thing for me, just summarizing, is that word of curiosity, because in everything else we've talked about, is just being curious for me is a great strength for everyone to have. Curious about how people perceive you, curious about what 3 words would people use to describe you, curious about how you're perceived in work versus at home. And I do think people generally lack curiosity as a real skill. And I'd encourage people to just ask one more question.
Nice. I like that. Just one more question. I really like that.
Just one more. When you think you're done and you know it all, just ask one more question. We've used a bit of a technique, or I've used it in some of our coaching, actually, called the 5 whys. And with someone with 4 kids, I've got used to being asked the question, "But why, Daddy? But why, Daddy?" And I think if you can get 5 whys deep in articulating yourself, then that person you're sharing the information will know everything that you know. Usually people get to maybe 2 or 3 whys deep and then don't know anymore. And if it's anything like my parenting style, it'll be just because I've said so. becomes usually my 3rd why.
Already.
But I'd love people to, for me, one thing, and I'll maybe ask you, Caroline, if there's anything else you'd want people to take away today, but just one more question would be my ask.
I put some tips down on my typed bit of paper.
Oh, amazing.
Ask more questions was my absolute number one. I think that it's this business, we just react. And I think when you're prepared to ask more questions, you respond to a situation in a much healthier way, and it stops you kind of emotionally reacting, because you're thinking about the question that you need to ask to gain that clarity and that understanding. So I think it leads to a much more harmonious workplace as well, actually, just by asking more questions.
Yeah, no, excellent. Well, look, I've loved our conversation today. I personally have taken something from it. I do hope it's been useful for yourself.
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you so much.
And I do hope people watching have taken maybe some techniques or some thoughts from today's session. So a massive thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Again, a big thanks to those people who watched this back. As we said throughout this event, your feedback and your comments are great. So I would love for people to come back, maybe after watching this. What did you learn from asking that one more question? How did that technique of playback, adding in those questions, what do you think? How do you feel? Would just be really great. I know, Caroline, you'd welcome that feedback as well. Yeah, so please come back, share this with people you think might be useful, and we will be back again soon.
Maybe we should ask people, Paul, to identify the 3 words that they would use to describe us as a result of today, just to kind of be transparent and open about it. Okay,
yeah, you've just pushed me right into my terror zone, Caroline. So Well, why don't we then? Yeah, maybe if people want to put that in the comments, what 3 words would they use to describe us? And that would be great. Actually, see how, I guess, 45 minutes of us chatting comes across to people. We can maybe separately sit and reflect on those, Caroline, together. So, but look, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks to everyone who's been watching and listening today. And we will be launching our next Behind the Wheel event very shortly. So please watch out for that. Register, and love to welcome you all back very soon. So thanks very much. And thanks again, Caroline.
Thanks.